So when I get that assessment notice in the mail, and I'm just thinking, personally, my own house, right? I get that annual notice. Here's your assessed value, and now here's your property tax calculated based on that. Or maybe they send two different ones. Is it essentially the same for commercial properties where some government official assesses the value and increases that or not every year? And like, I guess my other follow-up question is if that's the process, how do they do it?
Well, so most people don't realize this, but you cannot appeal the property tax itself. Okay. The rate is what it is. The amount that you pay every year is what it is. The only thing that you can appeal is the assessed value. And so the only kind of basis for appealing that assessed value is if it's incorrect. In other words, is the assessment over what the market value would be for your property type? And,
Mm.
with certain property types, like a home, you're going to have lots and lots of sales, probably sales right across the street with the broker signs that were hanging up, 3 months ago. And so it's relatively easy in most cases to predict what your home value should be on a per bedroom basis or per square foot, depending on what the market is saying. But it's not so easy when you're talking about a large industrial property, like let's just say a 1 million square foot manufacturing property that's in a small town where you're lucky to see sales of any sorts within a 3 year period of time. And so, what's important there is being able to kind of expand your scope and replicate what a typical market participant would look like. The same way that a home buyer would be for a neighborhood, you'd be looking for a market participant and what their predictive behavior would be with a property that's a certain size and type. And it may be where you have to expand your search for transactions into a regional approach or possibly national approach in the case of a 1 million square foot facility, because you'd be having a national buyer potentially evaluating alternative sites and looking at market pricing comparators between those sites. And so we have the ability to kind of replicate that behavior through our comprehensive subscriptions and databases on a national basis. And most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, your county and your state assessors do not have that same capability. And so they're kind of flying blind with their assessments, which is why with the property types that we deal with, namely the industrial, the senior care, the hotels, and large commercial properties, we see about 80% of the time those properties are overvalued by 20%. And so a very high propensity for appeals.
Ah,
If the mark is, it's usually hundreds of thousands of dollars to maybe millions of dollars at stake with the annual property tax bill. And a lot of complexity with doing a correct market analysis to determine whether the property is fairly valued or undervalued or overvalued.
got it. So like with my house, there were four homes in my neighborhood that sold recently. So those are easy comps for the assessor. They can look at my house, they can look at those four houses, compare the square footage, compute an assessed value for my home or
That's
what they think it should be. But you're talking about these big facilities, whether it's a hotel or a senior care facility or a manufacturing facility, where in a city, in a smaller city, well, even a big city, there might not be that many exchanging hands. So it's not like there is a
yes.
market price for this sort of thing, and even if there is, maybe it's not directly comparable. So the assessor has a really hard job to figure out what the value is, and you're saying they don't have access to the same national data, the same ways of assessing these values. I'm going to guess they're going to err on the side of going high rather than going low, right? Because their job is to essentially bring in revenue for the local government. So, and you're saying it can be as much as 20% off.
Well, it's more like they go different. So what they're left with is what's called a mass appraisal model, and in many cases, that's based upon reproduction cost new or construction cost trends in the area with very little tools to properly apply depreciation to bring the cost down to a true market value. And so our tools allow us to really bridge that gap on the depreciation side through market analysis. And so that really helps us
So you
to
mean
better predict that market value would be for that property type.
so you're saying are you saying that they are looking at what it would cost to like build a new facility? So they're not taking
Yeah,
into account,
exactly.
like you said, the
Yeah,
depreciation, right? The wear and
that's
tear.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it kind of looks a lot like insurable value with not a whole lot of translation to depreciated cost new to get to market value, right? So they start different. It could be high or it could be low, but it's different. And it's an easy modeling approach based upon square footage of construction cost trends. But then the depreciation side is where the rail car goes off the tracks, right? And so our job is to essentially translate the assessor's mass appraisal conclusion with true market data sources to better predict what that market participant, willing buyer, willing seller would pay for that property as of the assessment date for each of the years that we're evaluating for the assessment notice.
So you're coming up with a more accurate market value for these properties that is different than the assessed value. So to get that total tax bill down, now um, you've got to appeal,